So Pete Menke, I appreciate you coming on, man.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I Mike Rogers reached out to me and he said it was actually a very intriguing phone call because he just basically said, "Hey, I think I have a podcast guest for you that'd be very interesting." And I was like, "Go on, you know."
Yeah.
He's like, "Well, the guy's name is Menke," and at first I thought it was John,
Yeah.
who's your brother, correct?
Cousins.
Cousins,
Yeah,
forgive
yeah.
me, cousin. And at first I thought it was John Menke. I was like, man, I haven't heard Menke in a while. And he's like,
Yeah.
no, it's Pete Menke. I was like, oh shit, okay, well come on down, man.
Yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, we've spent the last like 10, 15 minutes kind of getting inundated with one another. But would you mind giving me just a quick rundown of like the brief biography of yourself? Like, why are you here today talking to me? Would you say?
That can go pretty deep. So what
Take your time.
where would you like for me to start though?
The beginning, the beginning of how you got into the Marines, because I think that's where the story
Gotcha.
that we're talking about today starts.
Yep. So I grew up in a middle class family. My dad was a produce manager at Schnucks his entire life. Worked his butt off. My mom worked at a church. My dad passed away shortly after I retired. My mom's still around. But from those family values that we had growing up, from my dad hard work, my mom hard work, and I was number 4 of 4 siblings. I love this country. I was very involved in martial arts as a kid. I was pretty active in a variety of sports as well. So all that coupled together, my patriotism, watching a lot of war movies with my dad, it led me to enlist in the Marine Corps. I went in 1997, about a month after I graduated, so July 13th of 1997, I was on the Yellow Footprints at MCRD San Diego. After that, I went into a anti-terrorism unit called Fast Company. It was Fleet Anti-Terrorism Security Team. I spent 2 years there. I did 3 deployments in those 2 years that I was there. One of them was to Kosovo, Macedonia, Skopje, Macedonia, when the USMC got attacked. We spent 3 months over there. Got done with that. Now, this can go a couple different ways. At that point, I was heavily interested in going into Marine Reconnaissance, Force Reconnaissance. So I took the selection for it, ran the NDOC. So there's a variety of steps that you have to take to get into units like that. So I did selection, ran the NDOC, passed everything. And then while I was en route to go to the reconnaissance unit, my orders got changed, and I ended up going to the infantry. From there, I deployed one more time, went out on a MU, a Marine Expeditionary Unit, so it was out at sea. The Cole got bombed. We were one of the first ships on scene when the Cole got bombed.
What does that mean? Forgive me. When the Cole got
The
bombed.
USS Cole.
Oh, forgive me.
USS
Okay,
Cole
a
bombed.
ship.
Sorry.
Forgive me.
Yeah, when it got bombed. So we did a little bit around that area. And with my disgruntledness, I got out of the Marine Corps, tried college. Actually, the first thing I went to was the bartending academy.
Bartending?
Yeah, that they used to have on the 105.7.
How old were you when you left the Marine Corps?
When I got out the
Forgive
first
me.
time,
When you got out the first time.
23.
Okay, so you had been there for roughly what, 4 or 5 years?
4 years.
4
a little
years,
over
okay.
4 years. Yeah. I did I got out in July of 2001. September 11th happened. I was drilling with the reserve unit out of Lambert, and they were like, pack your bags. I was in college when I got the call. I was going to class. Pack your bags. Let's get ready to go. So I was like, heck yeah, man, let's do this. That's why I joined. I want to fight for my country, and I love being a Marine.
Can you briefly describe to me the time? Because when 9/11 happened, I was in third grade, right?
Yeah.
Could you describe to me the feeling between you and your peers when all this is going down? Was there a sense of united patriotism? Was everyone on the same page? Like, hell yeah, let's fucking go, guys! Like they have the balls to hit us, we'll hit them
Yeah.
back harder.
Yeah.
There was no disgruntledness in this. There was only like everybody was on the same page, and that was to defend America.
100%. All the Marines that I served with in that reserve unit, they were like, let's fucking do this now. Let's go. Like, what are we waiting for? Without even thinking about it. And that's kind of the nature of the Marine Corps that I do think, in my opinion, and I've worked with all the services, not that there's anything they just think differently. The Marine Corps, it's no kidding. It's like it's a bunch of pit bulls that you let off when you need to. So all those dudes that I was with in that reserve unit, I was with a sniper platoon. They were like, "Fucking, let's do this now."
Yeah, of all the branches of the military that I've spoken to and spoken with people about, it seems like the Navy SEALs and the Marines are just like, no offense to the Army or the Air Force or, National Guard or what have you, but it seems like the Navy SEALs and the Marines are the ones you call when shit gets really hairy.
Yeah, so think of the SEALs and any special operations unit like and this is kind of cliche to say because everybody says it, but they're like a scalpel.
Yeah.
Think of Marine Corps infantry as a freaking, like a sledgehammer, a massive sledgehammer that's just going to go in and destroy anything it needs to. Point us in the direction with humanity. I've been there and I saw a lot of the humanity and people think that it used to be a saying when I first went in. One of my first deployments, people were like, "Did you actually have to kill one of your family members to go in the Marine Corps?" We were like, "What? Are you serious?" And it was in Macedonia that I got asked that. It was one of my. It
was clearly a non-American.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And we were like, no, that's not the case. And then of course somebody in the back is like, "Yep."
Dude, I would have lied straight to their face like, one, you had to do two.
Yeah. Both my cousins. Yeah. But yeah, everybody was ready to go. So 9/11 happened. We weren't going anywhere. So then I started thinking, I'm going back in. And right after I got out, shortly after I got out, I was working as I did everything. I went to EMT school. I was like, I'm going to be a paramedic firefighter. Then I went to the Eastern Missouri Law Enforcement Academy. I'm going to be a cop. I had no idea. I was throwing like spit wads at a wall. So,
do you feel like the military does a good job of? I don't want to say rehabilitation because I don't think rehab is the correct term, but I guess allocating the resources that they have created to civilian life better, because they spend so much time on educating and getting you guys prepared for the environment of battle and coalescing you into like kind of like a sharp weapon, like you were saying, between the scalpel and the sledgehammer. So you're the sledgehammer, but they take so much time and resources to train you and prepare you for what have you that war can bring. Do you feel like once it's all said and done and you come back to civilian life, that there's a good job of allocating those resources that they took so much time to prepare better to civilian life? Because one of the things that people kind of harp on in America is the treatment of veterans. And I don't mean veterans as like elderly. I mean veterans as the people that have served this country and fought for it, or at the very least provided their bodies to it, right? What are your thoughts on when you're done with your deployments, when you're done with your combat tours and all these other things, when you come back home, do you think they do a good job of like preparing you for that?
They do if you choose to take advantage of those programs.
Can you elaborate? What do you mean by that?
So, and that really started. Tell me if I got any boogies coming out, man.
It's
I got
okay.
sinus drainage.
No, you're good. You're good. I think we have tissues somewhere.
I'm good. It's just if it flies out, let me know. So
I'll join you.
Yeah. In the 90s, early 2000s, absolutely not. There was nothing. You got done and you were done. You had separation classes that you had to take, that everybody had to take. It's like, hey, you're going to be a civilian now. It was a week long. Now, for especially somebody that served in a combat zone or some kind of element that was related to combat, they do an excellent job. There's stuff like Intrepid Spirit, a variety of them that they send people to, or people have the opportunity to go to include family members. Like my wife, after every deployment, my wife would get briefed. They bring the wives in. They'd sit them down for, I don't know if it was a couple days, a week, or whatever. This is what you need to expect from your husband coming back. He may act like this now. You need to let him do this.
Wow, I didn't know they did that.
Yeah, well, and I say that,
It makes sense. It makes sense.
I was in a special unit, so I hate to say it, there's going to be more money and things put into those specialized units because of what you're exposed to include the family members. Because my wife and I are open books. Like we talk about everything that we need to, and she's been amazing for me. So, but yes, now they do, as long as you take advantage of those resources. And and I'll be honest, I didn't. When I got out, I got told, hey, you need to go here, you need to do this, you need to go to Intrepid Spirit, it's whatever, how many weeks long. You need to go do your ayahuasca trip and all this other stuff. And I'm like, I'm not doing any of that shit.
Is an ayahuasca trip like on the curriculum?
That's some of the stuff that is.
No
yeah.
shit.
Yeah, they bring people out to. I think the guy is in Nevada or New Mexico, but it's a retired SEAL, something like that. But yes, they do. They have formalized sessions like that you go out for a week. I think it's 5 days.
Yeah, and go trip balls.
To go do that, and they do it by phase. My buddies have had mixed experiences with it. The main reason I don't want to do it is because of my faith. Like I don't want to, and I don't like losing control of anything in my mind as much as possible. So I never did it.
I'm similar yet completely opposite. I've thought about going on a trip because of that. Because I also like to exert control in all aspects of my life.
Yeah.
From finances to my bodily autonomy, all these other things.
Yeah.
So the idea of possibly losing control for a brief moment kind of excites me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also one of those things where I know that after like an hour it's over.
Mm-hmm.
Possibly. I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe someone's gonna be like comments like you have no idea what you're talking about. I just like the fact that they, they're also kind of going. Not that I don't think the pharmaceutical companies do a good job of providing some sort of medication. They don't? No shit.
In my opinion. From what I've seen.
What is it all? Just like painkillers and antidepressants and the shit that kills the liver?
They'll try and load you up with all kinds of stuff. And now, again, just from my exposure, I've had a lot of people that have committed suicide, a lot of my buddies. A lot do just in general in special operations. Not a lot, but it's been more, right? That's why they have the 22 a day foundation. Like there's 22 a day supposedly that kill themselves that were combat veterans. But yeah, that stuff does some crazy shit to you.
I want to be careful how I ask this question now because we kind of went down a path. Do you think that forgive me, I want to word this properly. Do you think it is the training that provides this mental stress, or do you think it's the actual deployment and the things that are seen, or a combination of both to the mind? Because I've heard horror stories of like, SEAL camp and Marines and everyone just getting prepared to, earn their stripes to even go on deployment.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the community I came from, which was recon and force recon, right? I served in both capacities. You're assessed and selected, and then it's up to a year and a half of schooling before you even go to a unit. And then there's a variety of workups. So it depends on where you come from as to how that looks. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
So what was the second part of the question?
The second part of the question is essentially, you and I want to do this justice. So forgive me if I'm pausing a little bit because I want to choose my words very carefully. Suicide post-military deployment seems to be an issue. Mm-hmm. And we were briefly describing the impact that the pharmaceutical companies could or could not have on that. Mm-hmm. And what we were basically, what my question basically is it seems like the care given post-deployment is not adequate, and that just loading people up with pills or perhaps, getting a prescription from a doctor does not seem to be like an adequate solution to this issue.
So it depends on your aspect of looking at it. So when you're in the military, you're getting military doctors and what have you. When you get out, you're still getting that military-esque doctors, but it's the VA.
And that's a drastic change?
Yes, it's different in what they give you, how they treat you, what they do. Because I've had an ankle reconstructive, I have surgeries and all kinds of stuff. I've been blown up twice. The care was different there from here, but it also depends on the region of care, right? So
when you say region of care within the United States? I would
personally not go to Johnny Cochran Hospital, just from what I saw when I had to get out and check in over there. But the substations were phenomenal. Like there's other sub-medical stations you go see a doctor.
Do you have a choice? Like let's say...
It depends on your area. So it's a radius. I think it's a 70-mile radius that you check into. So if I was within 70 miles or 60 miles of Johnny Cochran, I would have to check in there.
No matter what, even if you didn't want to go there?
No, but my VA station is in St. Peter's. They moved.
Okay.
And I have to go there once a year.
And you prefer them over Johnny Cochran?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So back to the other question, though, that I kind of lost that train of thought. To answer it simply, when you did mixed martial arts, was the training harder or the fight?
Fuck, that is a good question, Pete. I would say that it,
It's
for
longer.
me, anecdotally, the training was harder on me physically, right? But mentally, it was easier because I was in a controlled environment where I felt comfortable. I was going to the gym. I was sparring
Yeah.
with the same guys. The fight was easier physically because it's a 15-minute ordeal. Yeah, it's a spike of, no one's pulling their punches or kicks. But after 15 minutes, it's over. It's not an 8-week, 12-week camp.
Yeah.
But mentally speaking, the fatigue of combat, of like your adrenaline, of being on hyper alert.
Yeah.
I mean, I always said to people, like, everyone always wanted to go party after a fight. And I was like, I can't wait to go home and shower, hit Taco Bell, shower, and sleep. That's all I wanted to do. And everyone was like, Arion, you're so boring. I was like, guys, you have no idea the adrenaline dump I'm feeling right now. It's like I just, I always hated the term when people say, like, we're going to war. I'm like, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
We're going to have a fist fight. We're both going to leave this. We're not going to war. But I did always feel like this was like the culmination of like a huge physical endeavor that I was undertaking.
And you wanted to do it.
Oh, absolutely.
So it's the same perspective with
I'm
the
fucked
guys.
up in the head, Pete. I'm sure if you and I like sat at a bar, we'd have a lot of things in common. Terribly sorry to interrupt the content that you're enjoying right now, but if you've been watching our content for the past couple of months, you realize that Easy Talk is a brand new podcast. We're genuinely trying to figure this thing out as we're going. Some growing pains for sure. If you are genuinely enjoying this content, we feel very humble in that, but we would like to ask that you would also subscribe and like to the channel, simply because it does help us in the algorithms and ultimately to grow. So take a second. I'd really appreciate it. And on with the show. Anyway, to bring it back full circle, though, because we were talking about the stress of training and deployment, and you asked me what's harder, the fight or training. And I think they're both in their own way. But if I were to tell you why I would never get back into fighting, it's the training camp. Yeah. It's the 12 weeks of preparation, of weight cutting and all these other things. If I could just show up fat and fight, I'd probably fight until I'm 50. Yeah. So I think I understand your question now, or the answer to your question. It's not so much, if I may. Actually, I will ask you, was it the deployment or was it the training?
The training was always way harder.
Yeah.
For us. I mean, it's nonstop. Speaking specifically to reconnaissance.
And you can never stop being a Marine. You're always a Marine.
Yeah, it is nonstop. It's exhausting. They push you really, really hard, so that just like a fight, when you get to combat, everything just flows. It's muscle memory.
You're ready.
Guys shit still happens, but you're again, cliche, a well-oiled machine maneuvering to fixate on the enemy. Or do your job, reconnaissance, whatever that looks like.
Did you ever feel the fatigue of armed forces, or did you enjoy the title at all times?
I loved it. I mean, everybody gets disgruntled. I think Marines are experts in general at bitching. But deep down inside, that same dude that's bitching all the time, I'll look up his Facebook page and he's wearing like a Marine hat. And he's got, Marine shit all over his Facebook. So they love it. My son calls me and bitches, but he still loves it. He loves being in the team. And for us, more so, it was the Marine Corps, yeah, because of what it stands for, what you're there to do. But being in that team, you're there for your dudes, man. Like, you're a family, period. And as much shit as you go through getting to where you're going, and then whether your deployment is a combat deployment or just a deployment, like, you're a family. You're fighting together, you're drinking together, you're hanging out together. You all make fun of each other. You know what I mean? It's super tight.
How is life now for you, kind of like post the enlistment period? Mm-hmm. They say, like, you don't ever stop being a Marine, or at least I speak to a Marine who says that. And you're now at this point in your life where you're not going to be deployed. You're not really going to see the front lines or any sort of combat scenarios. But what do you think about the current situation, the current level of armed forces, battle readiness, training, resources? Do you think that we are in a good trajectory or a bad one?
I'll reference, I don't know if you've seen it, but that comparison of a Navy commercial to a Russian commercial. Have you seen that?
Yeah. Where it's like,
my two moms, and hey, you do you. We were talking about, like, it's a free country, and that's what makes this country amazing. Because if you do that in another country, some of the countries I've been to, they no kidding bring you up on top of a building and chuck you off.
Yeah.
But that comparison, I think, speaks to where we're at right now.
So it's not
The Marine Corps is different. I will tell, and that's not just because I'm a Marine. They've tried a lot of stuff, integration processes, and all these other things to try and build these other with genuine honesty. Like, let's see if this works, right? So they had a female regiment, and I can't speak to it clearly because I wasn't a part of it. It was infantry, but it got.
You don't have to walk on eggshells, brother. Say it how you want it. Like,
That's just my personality.
Let me start it with this. I don't believe in women being drafted.
Yeah.
I think that's the craziest fucking thing I've ever heard. That's my toxic masculinity. I think it is the exclusive right of men to own and die to provide and defend their family.
Yeah.
There's no way in hell I would ever send my my wife to go defend my freedoms. Are you fucking kidding me? What kind of man am I?
Yeah.
So like when people talk about toxic masculinity, there are aspects of it that I'm sure I would not resonate with as well. However, there are aspects of toxic masculinity that quite literally keep everybody else alive and kill men.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
let's take the good with the bad. So like to that point,
It failed.
and it failed.
And it
Go
failed.
figure. I'm not trying to be sexist when I say this.
Yeah.
But when you can have all this dumb shit in every other aspect of life, go ahead. I don't care. But when the outcome is life or death, you have to operate in reality, honesty, truth. And what is truth? What is honesty? Men have different physical capabilities than women, different mental capabilities for combat and competitive nature. If I am going to be a Marine, I'm going to flat out say it right now. It's not that I think women can't do it. But if I were to take the average man and the average woman, I want a platoon or I want a group or I want a squad full of fucking average men before I take an average women.
Yeah.
Now, does that mean that women can't serve? No, that's not what I'm saying. Does that mean that women can't be in the military? That's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is if I'm going to try to defend the freedoms and liberties of this country that I hold so dear, I want to make sure that I'm doing it with the highest propensity for success.
Yeah. And
if I had the opportunity to create my own team, there would be some common characteristics among every single person in my squad.
Yeah.
That being said, do I feel like there's a position in women in combat roles? Absolutely. However, when we're talking about the elite, when we're talking about the creme de la creme, shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it.
Yeah.
I don't want to hear it. So you're fine. I just want you to know there's nothing you're going to say on this podcast that will be more egregious or more insane than what I'm going to say.
Yeah,
so you're good, brother.
Now, that's just my nature now, especially in what I do, just talking with people and trying to
do you feel? Why do you feel that way though? It's not. I don't think you're afraid to offend. Do you think? Where does that come from?
It depends on the topic. It's not really necessarily afraid to offend. It's just a general. I don't know. Like
a respect for individuals?
Perspective of just the kind of kindness that I want to show. You know, and people understand that. So when I'm talking with somebody, I don't want them to feel pushed out. Now, if it gets to a point where it's like blatant, then obviously I have to flip a switch.
Yeah.
But again, I never had that before. It took me a little bit after I've been retired for 4.5 years now. I was a way different person before, and it took me, I'd say, about a year. My wife might argue with that, for me to kind of settle down, calm down.
That's a beautiful thought, Pete.
So, yeah, I don't know what sparked it. I didn't do anything crazy. It was just really what helped me chill were my kids, and that was one of the main reasons why I got out, was my kids. You know, now my oldest is in doing what I did, and he went in. I mean, I only had a couple of years with him in high school, and then he went in
because you were.
I was gone all the time. I was gone all the time while I was in.
Can you speak briefly on the cost? We often talk about, and when I say we, I mean civilians often talk about the price to be paid for our freedoms. Mm-hmm. But can you articulate to me the price you had to pay in your life, in your ability to be a father, present in your family's life, not just your children, but also your wife? Mm-hmm. Can you explain to me the toll you have paid mentally, mm-hmm. physically, emotionally, time? When you look back on it, is it Do you look back on it with pride or resentment? Because it's a steep bill, man.
No,
It's a steep
I would
bill.
100% say pride.
Beautiful.
But because I did try really hard to be with my family when I could. And when I got married before I went into a special operations unit. So my wife knew.
What she was signing up for.
Yeah. Kind of, kind of. Not really. She's from St. Charles, so she really had no idea. She hadn't been out of the country. Anyway, I did the best that I could to be with my family when I could, and as few and far between as that was. The only regret I have is not being able to contain my emotions with my family, and I never beat them or anything like that. I was tough. I'm still tough on my kids. They're all wrestlers. They all have grown up doing. My daughter did Muay Thai. I've made them do Kempo with me, all kinds of stuff. So they were always involved. We rode dirt bikes trying to do that stuff. But I mean, let me put it this way: my oldest, who's like I said, a Marine now, he got through boot camp and got through school of infantry and was getting ready to go to selection for reconnaissance. And he calls me and he's like, "Dad, I know why you were pissed off all the time." I'm like, "Why is that, buddy?" He goes, "Because Marines are dumb." So I brought
Does it
that
fill you with
home.
pride to see him now?
Oh yeah, yeah, definitely. I do give him shit because he was a great wrestler. He oftentimes let his emotion of who he was wrestling. If it was a big name or somebody, he'd be like, "Oh man, Dad," and I'm like, "Dude, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter." And on top of that, it's just wrestling.
Yeah.
So, but he had not offers, but he had colleges talk to him, jury and whatnot.
But you decided to listen instead.
And he was like, "I'm going to the Marines. I'm going to do what you did." It was either that or the Rangers. And I was like, "All right, buddy, I'll support you."
Can I ask you a more broad question? And we briefly discussed this over the phone on our way over here, but I need to preface the next series of questions with this. I want everybody to understand that I love and deeply cherish this country. It's given me everything that I am and have. So I love America. I want everybody to understand that. However, that being said, I also have some criticisms. And they come from a place of wanting to make sure that we can truly be the best version of ourselves, the best country that could possibly exist, and not necessarily rest on our laurels and say, like, the previous generation's victories are our own. One of the things that kind of scares me is this detachment between when I was younger, paying your taxes was seen as patriotic. Like, hey, you drive on the roads, you benefit from the law enforcement and the firefighters and all these other things, and you benefit from the people actually out there defending our freedoms and our liberties and our way of life. You need to kind of pay into that to make sure that all the financial aspects of this are taken care of.
Yeah.
However, the notion now of paying your taxes is like, you're a dummy, you're an idiot. This money's going to X, Y, and Z, and it's being laundered here. And I worry deeply about the trajectory this country is taking for two reasons. One, the physical reality of, our quality of life slipping, our placement in the world slipping, our respect amongst our geopolitical peers slipping. But I also worry about the social ramifications. I see less patriotism. I see more vitriol and infighting. I see less people proud to be American and more people proud to be Democrat or Republican. And the fear I have is this is a trajectory that leads to a failed empire, a failed state.
Yeah.
Because we're no longer talking about what coalesces and brings us together and more about what divides and the differences that we have. So my question to you is, the environment that existed when you enlisted is completely different than the environment that exists now. Do you think this is a healthy trajectory? And what do you say to the kids that might want to enlist, that might want to serve their country? Do you think, there are those that would say it's a fool's errand. There are those that would say, like, what are you doing, kid? Like, there's X other things you could be doing with your time that's more valuable. What would you say to that? And how do you navigate this landscape now compared to when you were first enlisting?
Yeah, I definitely 100% agree with you, I think, with the way that society's going. And I saw it when I was a reconnaissance instructor as it started to trickle. No matter what, everybody always says it was better when I did it. It was harder when I did it. I was, when I was training, they used to beat us with rattan sticks. You know, it's like, no, they didn't.
We had to kill a family member to get into the Marines.
yeah. You have to kill 2 family members.
They got
to get in the
soft.
Marine Corps. Yeah. But think about and I'm not saying it's all, but in general, the kids that enlist, they don't come from high-end families.
No.
They don't come. It's a middle class and lower family. And I had a lot of buddies that they had nothing. I knew a dude from Alaska that literally had nothing. He didn't even take showers at boot camp. It was bad. Like, this dude had no idea. He was like, that's not normal. So the type, and I'm not saying everybody, but the types in general that join the military are patriotic kids that come from. I grew up in Warrenton, you know. Well, first Florissant and then Warrenton, but I spent my middle school and high school years out there. But the people that are enlisting are the people that are truly living in this country.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Oh, yeah. No, it does.
So that doesn't change. What's changed inside of that
Can I
is their
ask you a
attitudes.
question? Can I ask you a question about
Yep.
that statement that you just made about living in this country? Do you think there's a difference in living in a city and living in rural America?
No, it's just a different atmosphere.
Okay, so then when you say living in this country, can you
City the same.
Okay.
Two of my buddies when I was in the infantry before I went into recon were from New York. Like, one of them was from the Bronx.
Okay, so a city can get.
Yeah, and he ended up being one of my best friends.
Oh shit.
You
okay.
know, another dude came from Colorado. You know, another guy, but I think it's the population line of who enlists, not the
area.
right? It's middle class and lower, like middle class, not the 3 classes of middle class they have now. It's middle class and lower that are enlisted. Officers are a little different. That's going to be a little higher
Higher educated, they start because they have a college degree or some sort of.
But there's always, like, when I thought about this when I was thinking about this whole podcast. I had a buddy in the grunts with me who had his master's in, like, mechanical engineering, and he went in and enlisted. So you'll see that too. I had another buddy that was a high school teacher, and he went in and enlisted. He was like, I don't want anything to do with that because I want to do this shit.
Can I tell you one of the people on this planet, and I don't even know if Mark Dodge even remembers me. My brother went to college with a neurosurgeon. Mm-hmm. This guy graduated with a doctorate in brain surgeon. Mm-hmm. And he decided to go into the Air Force right after school. And then when my brother at the time was like, what do you mean, dude? Like, you just did all these years of school. Like, what are you doing? You want to know what Mark's response to my brother was? He's like, why wouldn't I do this? Like, to him, it was just like, what do you mean? Like, why wouldn't you enlist? Like, there is a beauty to the sense of service. Mm-hmm. My fear is that will erode if they feel like they're not serving a higher cause. Like, America, to me, is the greatest invention that man has ever made. Humanity. The greatest form of self-governance has ever existed on the face of this earth, to our knowledge. The dichotomy of how it is run versus what it is where I find my schism, my oil and water. Like, it just doesn't mix well. And my fear is, for me personally, if you asked me to defend this country, if you asked me to go to war, I would say yes. Who are we fighting and why? Those are my first 2 questions. Who are we fighting and why? And I feel like the answer should just be yes. I shouldn't have to have a second question. I should be like, I love this country. Yeah. It's made me the man I am. Why would I even second guess it? And the fact that I do means that there's something wrong there. Yeah. There's a distrust, and I shouldn't. I don't want to make this about what America is becoming, because I want to make sure that I shoot this through. America is the only place I will ever live. There has never been a thought in my mind to move to another country. There's America, a country mile, and then number 2, okay? However, it goes back to my criticism of we can always be better. It does not, the status quo does not have to stay status quo. We can always, how can we evolve? How can we become better? How can we be more efficient, more prosperous, more capable? Yeah. My fear is this trajectory. Yeah. And when I talk to
Dang, man.
Older is the problem is I'm 31. The problem is I'm 31. Yeah. So, like, let's say you're like 38. You're older than me, but you're not older, right? Yeah. When I talk to gentlemen my age or slightly older than me, it's a completely different conversation from when I talk to. I coach high school wrestling. I couldn't imagine some of these kids being given a gun and saying, "All right, kid, off to the front lines." They would not be prepared.
Yeah.
They would not be prepared.
Yeah. Well, that's what boot camp is for. But I think that the trajectory that you're talking about is based on what the ideologies of those areas are. And that's what's damaging. Because now, I'll be honest, dude, I don't trust anything that I hear or see.
Me neither.
And you hear stuff about, the Iraq war, for example. We were weapons of mass destruction and all this. There's so much other stuff. This is what nobody really understands. There's so much other stuff that is, sorry, I'm trying to block that is
fine.
going on that no one needs to know, So I will say this. In Iraq, I had our sister platoon, reconnaissance platoon, went into an area that definitely had some weird stuff in it. They just got out of that space.
What do you? I want to be careful when
Nuclear,
I ask.
biological, chemical
Okay.
type stuff, right? But that may be what they put out there, but there's some, and I'm not saying that it was right or it was wrong, but there was so much other stuff. I mean, the amount of cleansing, I guess you'd say, that they did over there with some ethnicities and religions and what have you. You know what I mean? That there's just way more to the picture than what is seen. Even when I was operating, you don't get the whole story. They can't. Now, not everything is just, but there's a lot more to the picture than what is presented, and that's for a reason.
I think the criticisms for the invasion of Iraq were under the pretenses that when words like weapons of mass destruction are used, everyone's immediate reaction is a mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So and this is why I often say that the English language is the greatest tool, because words have meaning and power. When you say things, you have to be concrete in the words that you say, because it's held down by the weight of history.
Yeah.
So if they would have said there are chemical weapons and the possibility, based on some of the information intel that we're seeing, possibility of weapons of mass destruction.
Yeah.
That's not the narrative that was shown.
No, not
the
at
narrative
all.
that was shown was, we're going in there because there are weapons of mass destruction, whatever that may or may not mean. And then when it turned out to be false, the reason we've arrived to the criticisms and to the, I want to say, hostilities that the American populace have with the government is not overnight. It is death by 1,000 paper cuts.
Yeah.
I equate my relationship with my government versus my country with the wife that I want and the girlfriend that I got. Right? It's like, you can only lie to me so many times before I no longer listen, before I'm no longer cognitive to what it is that you're trying to spew to me.
Yeah.
So it's like, September 11th turned from a terrorist attack to, was it?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan was we're going after the people that attacked us. Did we?
Yeah.
And then, oh wait, the housing crisis was a financial, instrument collapse. Was it? Because they knew what they were doing. And then COVID, the way we tackled this, mandation of vaccination and your inability to fend for your family by working.
Yeah.
This was for the greater good.
Yeah.
Was it? Ben Lawler and the Tom James family will ensure that whether you're purchasing your first custom fit suit or your 50th, the process is unrivaled. With the experience and quality of the Tom James name, allow Ben Lawler to help shape the vision that is your professional brand with a suit that speaks to the conviction in their craft. With fabric sourced here in the US, you'll know quality and craftsmanship are top of class. Like a sculptor examines wet clay before creating a masterpiece, Ben Lawler will walk you through the process of selection, measuring, and stitching to ensure your finished product is a work of art. Putting your trust in Ben is a guarantee that your brand will elevate to the next level. And always remember, you don't get a second chance at a first impression.
When there's an agenda, that's always going to be there. But
Can you extrapolate on that? When there is an agenda, what do you mean by that?
just the politics today. Everything's pushed by agenda, in my opinion. Right? It's all, what am I going to get out of this? What is true to me, not to serve the greater good. And I'm not saying all of them, because there's a lot of really genuine, even politicians out there that want to serve, or they get into it for the right reasons. and they may get corrupted somewhere
Then the
along the
game
way.
changes, though.
But I mean, that's also human nature in a lot of ways, especially if you're weak, you know. So, yeah.
Pete, forgive
But
me.
just like that old saying, and I'm probably going to screw this up, but tough men make easy times, right?
Easy times
I mean,
make
that's
weak men.
historical. That's always happened.
Yeah, but I would challenge that paradigm, because I don't think tough men make easy times.
Mm-hmm.
I think weak men make bad times, yes, but I don't think tough men, good men, make easy times. Okay, let me explain this to you the best way I can. It took an extremely strong family unit. My mother and father taught me very well, and then the lessons that they bestowed upon me taught me how to be strong mentally and physically.
Yeah.
So, like, if I didn't have those role models, I wouldn't be prepared for the world and all of its trials and tribulations. I don't necessarily know if strong men make good times and then thus good times make weak men. I think strong men make good times and weak men make weak men. I think the paradigm right now is like a bar graph.
Yeah.
If you have 50-50, strong, weak, you can kind of exist. But when that shifts to where strong men are becoming the minority, where it's becoming increasingly difficult to find someone with moral character, physical acumen, intelligence, then you will lead to bad times. But it was not strong people that caused it. It was strong people that were trying to prevent it.
Yeah.
I think bad times have a way of making people rise to the occasion, but I hate this notion that, like, you know, it's this self-fulfilling prophecy of like, well, you know, victory defeated us. No, victory doesn't have to defeat you.
Yeah.
Keep your moral character. Keep your conscience. Listen to the people that came before you. You're the arbiters of the world today, but you're going to leave it to the next generation. And they, you know, for all the good and bad that the boomers get, they gave us arguably the best country that's ever existed on the face of the earth.
Greatest
And
generation.
I don't blame the previous generation for fucking it up. I blame mine.
Yeah.
Because I'm seeing it in real time. Even if you say like, oh, well, you know, the average age of Congress is older. Yeah, well, who votes them in?
See, and that's where I was going with that and how I perceive that. You gave me a different perspective on strong men create those times, right? I look at it as strong men provide that security
To allow for
comfort
weak
to
men.
allow for the weak men to do what they do.
Maybe there's some truth to that as well.
And what I think is escaping us is not in the samurai sense or anything like that, but the warriorhood of being an American that you just don't see. There's not there. It's not instilled, and it was in mine. I come from a heavy military background. You know, my brother served. My dad tried to serve during like the Vietnam era. My grandpa served. So it's a long history of service. So it was just, I think that maybe it's in my blood, right? They say it was in my DNA to just do that. And my sons. My daughter wanted to serve, and I'm like, babe, you're not. I'll let you go in the Air Force. Something over there. But,
all the Air Force guys are like, what the fuck?
yeah. Some of my buddies are going to be calling me.
Dude, I'm already going to get a bunch of hate for this episode. It's okay.
But she's a great wrestler. She signed with Mobap. She's going to go wrestle at Mobap.
I often say this whenever I talk about the sexes. Societally, I want there to be no differences between men and women because I have a daughter. However, in the realm of reality, we have to navigate those waters accordingly, and there are.
Yeah.
It doesn't make it good or bad. It just makes it what it is. You know, like,
Well,
my daughter will have strengths that I don't have, and she'll have weaknesses that I don't have, and that's okay.
yeah. I've seen many
Fine.
perspectives on women in combat and women in combat roles, which has led me to my belief on that and why I said that to my daughter. So I've seen it, and again, it's a general statement, but it's not to specify something or someone. But I have seen where the women are around a bunch of alpha dudes. What do you think's going to happen?
Yeah.
It's going to happen. I've also seen females in combat that crumbled.
May I ask? The criticism of that would be like, well, you know, by saying like, you know, women around alpha males, what happens, it's nature. The argument could be made that they should be disciplined enough to not. What would you say to that argument?
People are people.
They
man.
should.
People are people, you know. Yeah. I shouldn't have drink as much as I used to, but sometimes it happens. You know?
Yeah,
But
I mean,
people are
humanity
people.
is a flawed creature.
Especially when you start thinking about the atmosphere and maybe what's going on, right? You know, an intense environment that, no kidding, Iraq, right, for example, getting indirect fire from vehicles that just pull up and they try and bomb you. And you're in a, you know, Camp Fallujah with females, males, special operations units, infantry, logisticians, everybody's there. Like, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And then you tighten that down to a female with just a bunch of dudes that are jacked and going out and doing cool shit,
yeah,
right? Video
yeah.
game stuff. It does. It just happens. Now we had a female dog handler that we brought out on a mission. She was badass and got into a firefight, and she wouldn't get out of the Humvee. So my buddy had to go pick her up with her dog while the dog's like snapping at him, and bring her and him into the house, the dog into the house. I've also seen, and again, this is general. This is just my experience,
Anecdotal,
right?
anecdotal.
So,
And Pete, that's
another-
why I brought you on. Just tell me about your
yeah,
story.
yeah, another female that we had just stopped ID-ing placers, and female came up with a high-ranking official and saw everything that had just previously happened, and she started throwing up everywhere. No, a male could have done that, for argument's sake, but the string of events that unfold when that happens.
I always operate under the assumption that, like, am I saying that women cannot serve? That's not what I'm saying.
No, they 100%, and they serve
What I'm
great.
saying is, if you took the average man and the average woman, what they're capable of physically is different. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And if we're adding the stress of life or death, I will take any small percentage I can to have the highest propensity for getting home alive. That's all I'm saying.
And I do know that women serve in some pretty intense combat roles in tier 1 units. I'll just say that. So there's
makes sense.
there's some badass.
I'm sure there's always enigmas.
There's always going to be them out there, and they yeah.
I always say, like, you know, the top, you know, 10 women in the UFC at a weight class could probably beat up 80% of the average man, you know, until it gets like the heavier men and all these other things. To bring this back full circle, one of the reasons why Mike first even introduced me about you was he was saying that you're trying to start a business, a martial art, a sort of I'm not going to do this justice to explain it. So do you mind if I ask you, what is it that you're working on right now? Because Mike was very attracted to it, and he said, hey, this is interesting, you should have him on. You're working on your own martial art. What is it specifically?
Yeah, I mean, you could call it a martial art. I think martial art is just a generic term like karate.
Yeah.
That's extremely overused and people don't understand. Martial war art, right? So it is you could call it a martial art, but it's more of a self-defense, a personal protection, and protection of life, like protection of your family, what have you. So it's built on essentially 3 pillars, right? I've attempted to combine. Let's see how it works out, right? Letway, which is Myanmar boxing, so it's similar to Muay Thai, but they allow headbutts, no gloves. The rules are a little bit different, and then I've taken. Obviously, there's grappling in there because it's inherent that you got to be prepared for everything for a fight.
When
right?
you get close, you will grapple.
Yeah. Whether it's stand up or on the ground, whether I'm clenching, that's grappling. It's still a fight, grappling fight. And one of the center pillars is I grew up doing American Kempo.
Kempo karate.
Kempo karate.
Okay, forgive me.
So I've taken what I saw as in Kempo that I liked, and tried to combine those 3 into, I guess it would be a system to teach people to be safe. Essentially, the bottom line. I think what's intriguing, what caught Mike, was towards the middle to higher belts. You have to get CPR qualified. I'm going to run a background investigation on you. Towards the middle belts, towards the higher belts, like my 3 degrees of brown, and then on the black, you're going to learn home defense, vehicle defense, weapons of opportunity. So edged weapons, sticks, whatever I can grab, right? That's associable. and then getting into
So you're
firearms.
going to do a belting system for this as well.
Yep. Yeah.
And basically to introduce this sense of what, like, because I always said that belting is kind of like a foreshadowing of skill set, right? If like you're a black belt in something, then obviously you should be relatively competent in it, right? But you're trying to do a belting system for self-defense.
Well, that's already
Who would be
there.
the greater of that, though? I mean, think about that. Like how that's
Belts
gotta
are a
be
metric,
difficult.
like you said, and let's be honest, belts, they're number one, they're a metric. Period.
Yes.
You have to have a standard. Number two, it's a business model for a lot of systems. So you can't escape that. In order to survive, you have to be somewhat
Financially
business savvy,
viable?
yeah,
Yes.
financially liable, right?
And there's nothing that gets human beings going like the sense of progression.
Yeah, and those phase lines, the progression, it's encouraging, it's things, it's goals to strive for. You look at those people at higher belts with respect, and you're like, hey man, I want to be like that. So there 100% there has to be a belt system to it. Otherwise, it's. I mean, boxing is great. There's no belt system to it, but I look forward to the next fight.
Yeah.
Kickboxing, I look forward to the next fight. MMA, I'm looking forward to the next fight. Even though people are trying to belt MMA now.
Are they?
Create belts. I've seen that with some, yeah.
How do you belt
I have no
a
idea.
mixing of martial arts?
Well, I'm doing it, but I don't know how they're
But
doing
you're
it.
doing it with a specific
Yeah.
intent of self-defense. This
Yes.
is sport. This is different. Like, and by the way, I have my questions for you as well, because
Yeah.
when you start getting into like true self-defense, I mean, that is a myriad of things. Like, yeah, that's the
100%.
physical aspect of it, of course. Close quarters combat, distance combat. I would even say as far as even social combat, right? Being able to diffuse a situation or manipulate people if I need them to. There's
100%.
what you're trying to do seems so difficult. How long have you been thinking about this?
Oh,
Years?
forever.
Really?
So my argument, I love that if anybody's trying to improve themselves, whether it's through martial arts or especially physically, because I think that we, just like our previous conversation, we lack that greatly.
We need to bring that
physical.
back
Yes,
ASAP.
100%.
To men
So
and women. To men and
yes,
women.
everybody. So that's like the foundation of it is combat fitness. Then it goes into these three pillars, and then I have these pillars that a nice graph that I made, that go up. What I want to do is create a system. I think I have created a system where it doesn't stay stagnant. So I think one of the things, and again, my opinion, I've studied a lot of martial arts growing up. I've done Taekwondo, Kempo, obviously, I've done Kung Fu. I tried Capoeira. I was Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I've competed in a lot of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, submission and gi. But I think a lot of the traditional martial arts didn't evolve with the times. It obviously worked, or they wouldn't have done that, and it survived that long. But they didn't evolve, and they
I
weren't
would make
pressure
the
tested.
argument that they de-evolved, that they've become
Yes,
commercial.
100%.
And I hate to say this about jiu-jitsu, but it's happening to jiu-jitsu in real time. It's turning into, I mean, the fact that we have, and I had Mike on, but the fact that there is like a distinction between self-defense jiu-jitsu and competition jiu-jitsu, to me, is the commercialization of a martial art that was designed for the small man to defend themselves against the big man. So forgive me for interrupting, but
No, you're good. And exactly, that's my point. And so I this system, though there's going to be those three pillars for certain reasons, I want it to have the aptitude to adapt as the threat adapts.
This
Whether
doesn't
that's
seem
technological or
this
whatever.
doesn't seem like a martial art. It seems like a way of life. It seems like you're
Yeah.
trying to make battle-ready people. So, like, how would this be different from like a Krav Maga, for instance, which is like an Israeli martial art
Yeah.
for self-defense,
Yeah.
not necessarily to compete in, but like you're doing, like, help me, like, okay, let's say you have this product in place today, and I want to preface it with, you might not have all the answers on this, so forgive me if I'm kind of like digging into the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
But let's say, like, okay, I'm Ariane Zekthi. I want to come into this system starting as a white belt. What does that look like? What does like day one look like? Are we doing boxing? Are we doing wrestling? Like, what are we doing?
So day one with white belts, the progression, you start off with basic stand-up left way. So knees, elbows, headbutts, not headbutts right away. It's going to be progressive. Obviously.
Yeah, obviously
I'm not gonna
easing
teach
into
somebody
it.
how to,
Hey, buddy,
there's a lot that goes into it. Right?
There goes your nose.
There's a certain way you do it. There's parts of the head. There's a way you do it, and you have to build that muscle memory. And there's a strength that you have to build. But basic striking, basic grappling. And I'm no black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. I'm probably one of the longest living blue belts ever. I got it in 2011, and couldn't keep going because of the Marine Corps. But now,
Brother, I've been doing jiu-jitsu for 15 years. I'm still a white belt.
Yeah. So
no gi till the day I die, brother.
yeah. But it's a progressive system that can adapt, even though those three core principles stay the same. And with the Kempo, what I've tried to do is get rid of what I thought was not essential to personal protection and apply it to a certain format. So scenarios is the way that I've stood it up. Before they call it a technique, they still do. Like, I'm going to block and then I'm going to chop you in the neck or whatever, right? They're all mini scenarios that help you build muscle memory, and that's it. It's not that you're expected to do that same thing. It's that when you can muscularly, intuitively recall that in a high threat situation, you can do that. No matter what that looks like, right? With me, the core of it, though, I don't want people strictly fighting on the ground. I want you to be able to fight on the ground, but I want you to get back to your feet.
Every fight starts on its feet.
So, well, when you start talking about weapons and people and buddies and everything else, it's happened to me personally. I got into a fight, did a beautiful double leg, mounted the dude and started drilling his head in the ground, and I woke up the next day with lace marks on my face and my ribs, So that reality has to be there.
Because someone else got involved.
Yeah, like a bunch of dudes got involved.
A bunch of dudes got involved.
So there is that reality. And then what if there's a knife, which is probably one of the scariest things that can get pulled, way scarier than a gun, because if a knife comes out, you're getting cut. That guy may not be able to know how to shoot or load or reload or anything else, right? But with a knife, you're getting cut if a knife's coming out. So you have to be somewhat mentally prepared for that and be able to react to it. So again, the system has to adapt to the situations and the times and the environment.
Would you focus on self-defense or also aggression? Because a lot of times when I see these martial arts, it's usually like, I'm unarmed, this person has an armament of some kind, whether it's a knife or a gun. But is there any aspect of I am also armed. I have a handgun, or I might have a knife.
Yeah.
What is the proper way to use this to defend myself? I mean, and then here's the other thing, and I don't know if you've thought about this, but the philosophy of when is it appropriate to take life?
Yeah, no, 100%. So that's why those things aren't incorporated until
later on.
Way later on. There's a background investigation. You have to learn CPR, first aid, before you get anywhere near that area. So I have broke down into 4 phases, fourth phase being when you earn your black belt. But that's, you start learning those weapon systems. It's way later on. You've already been in the system for years. I tried to mimic. We're good at stealing stuff, right? Like, I'm going to take this from here and make it work for me. I'm going to take this.
Imitation is the greatest form of flattery.
That's what I did with the belt system. There's time limits. There's age limits. I don't want a 16-year-old black belt walking around. Like, you have to be 20 years old at least. How could they be? Right? So, and even then, the way that it's set up, it has to be appropriate to keep business, but it also has to be appropriate to what you're teaching them. So that's how there's quality control inside of it. And me as the dude who is running it, if I don't feel that you can handle it, then you're not going to do it. It's as the system grows, if it takes off, if it goes anywhere, how's that quality control?
So forgive me. This is the first time I'm hearing of this. So the questions are not to poke holes. They're more like,
honestly, I want you to.
Yeah, it's more what comes directly to mind. Yep. So whenever I think of any martial art, I think about the possibility of repetition, because repetition is how you learn. The muscle memory, for instance. Yeah. How come you can get really good at a double leg takedown? Because a double leg takedown doesn't really have that much detrimental effect to your training partner. How do you take that aspect of repetitions for things like hand-to-hand combat? Okay, not necessarily with a knife.
Yeah.
How to properly use a handgun. Are you taking people to the firing range? Are you? Yep. Is that a part of the curriculum?
Yes.
We're going to learn how to use a handgun. We're going to learn how to use both close quarter combat weapons, like perhaps a knife. maybe a stick. I'm not 100% sure.
Yes.
I'm not doing this justice with the question, but I guess what I'm trying
All
to say
the
is
above.
there's many forms of combat. There's many forms that self-defense can take place. Martial arts is one of them. Hand-to-hand combat with a weapon is another. Distance is another.
Distance,
so how are
timing.
you going to handle these? Because it sounds like to me you're taking on the monumental task of creating warriors.
Yeah.
But not warriors just physically, but also mentally. What I mean by that is a warrior to me, Pete, is not someone that looks for conflict.
Yeah.
But it's always better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war, right? So like someone who is capable of violence, holds back these tendencies, but is capable of causing immense physical
Personal protection.
personal protection. Thank you. I was about to say something a little darker.
Yeah.
So like how do you handle that? Because that's a wide fucking net.
It is. Yeah.
Because like I said, I've been doing this for 15 years, but the confidence I have with my hands is not the same. Like if you gave me a knife, I'll be honest with you, I've never stabbed a thing before in my life. I don't even know if I'd be able to do it properly. And then if you gave me a gun, I personally, I have guns. I know how to clean, maintain mine, but I haven't spent as many hours on the range as I have in the cage or training. So like my acumen for martial art, like for jiu-jitsu, boxing, kickboxing, all these things is greater than my acumen for firearms training.
Yeah.
So how will you balance all of this?
So,
And forgive me if I'm asking you tough questions, but this is
not
like
at all.
kind of like what's coming to my mind.
no, you're not at all. Please do. And any holes that can be shot, I want to make it good.
I
wanna
like the
make it so-
concept. I like the concept.
I truly believe in trying to teach people to protect themselves and mentor people to be better people. Right? That's that. If I could do that and not charge people genuinely, I would just run a school, because that means also I can train whenever I want. I can bring in my own crew of dudes and we can beat the shit out of each other, at noon,
Boys
and then
boys.
teach classes later. You know what I mean? So I do. I believe in that model. It has to be a business. It has to thrive, hopefully grow. But there has to be that self-containment. It is, in the true aspect of being a warrior in that model, it is training a warrior. It's not training a militiaman, though.
No.
You know what I mean? Which is why I want to have a strict temperament to it. And I honestly don't know how I'm going to tackle that if it grows. If it gets to a point where it's like, hey, I want to open another school. I know that I want my kids to be involved because that's how they've been brought up. I'm starting to teach my daughter knife fighting now, right? So there has to be a temperament to it, and there has to be a selection criterion process.
You don't think that
but
temperament happens on its own?
That's what I'm hoping for.
Yeah, because I'll be honest with you. I remember before I learned how to fight, when I was like 18, 19 years old, I always thought like, oh, I can't wait. Like when I was going to the gym for the first time, I thought to myself, I can't wait till I can actually throw hands for real, because then I'll be fucking everybody up.
Yeah.
And then a year after training, I realized like, oh, dude, fighting is dumb. Like this
Yeah.
is all so stupid. Why? I don't have any problems with you. Like
Yeah.
I don't want to have. I don't know if you have a knife. I don't know if you have a gun. It's not even worth it for me. Martial arts, in my opinion, makes for better human beings because it develops this thought in your head that once you realize you can defend yourself, you calm down. I think a lot of the stresses in our lives comes from the insecurity of knowing deep down in our hearts whether or not we could truly defend ourselves.
Yeah.
Now, can I defend, everyone in my family from a guy with guns and I don't have a gun? No, that's not what I'm saying. What I am saying is when I go out to a bar, I'm chilling because I know if push came to shove, I'm not saying I could beat the guy up, but I know I could defend myself. I know I'll be able to walk away.
Yeah.
And the vast majority of men and people can't say that. And I think a lot of the tendencies for violence to escalate doesn't come from trained people choosing to escalate a situation. It comes from scared people just trying to walk away.
Yeah. Or pride.
Or, oh, dude, pride's
Because you're with your buddies, you're chest buffing. I know I've gotten enough fights because my buddies are here, and I'm like,
Kinda
"Can't look
gassing
like a
you
bitch."
up?
Yep, here we go.
Do you think that's a youth thing though that'll escape you with time? Like, would you say that you have the same tendency now at your age now that you
heck
did
no.
10 years?
No.
Yeah, I think it's a youth thing.
Oh, it is 100%, but it's still there, and I think
Fair,
that's what you want
fair.
to influence. And a lot of martial arts schools, their influence is on kids,
Yeah. Okay.
not
fair.
necessarily adults, because it's tough to get.
Would that be the
adults.
target market? Start them young.
The target market would be whoever wants to come in.
in.
Yeah.
I like the idea of something like this. First of all, I've said it time and time again. I think there are certain things in life that just make you a better person. Enlisting, serving your country is one of them. Waiting tables, as dumb as it sounds, but serve it like
Yeah.
in the service industry is one of them as well.
Yeah.
And I think martial arts is one of them as well. Not even, even if it's not tied to, I guess I would also extend that to sport. Any sort of competitive endeavor where you're physically putting yourself through stress,
Yeah.
both mental and physically, will just make for better humans. So I like the idea of just another tool out there that can A, sharpen the mind, and B, sharpen the body.
I agree, as long as there's proper mentorship with that, because you see too often, I
Fake
think
bullshit.
now, yeah. And guys like, no, you should be this, that, when in reality, they're not that either. They could be a coach telling them, no, you shouldn't let people disrespect you and do this and that and whatever, instead of just walking away.
Do you feel like there's a lot of hostility in martial arts inward unto itself? Because, okay, I'll explain it in a different way. Or let me ask my question in a different way. Martial arts seems to be the only thing that I do in my life where there is active criticism from within. People saying that other people don't. Like a black belt might say, well, that guy's not a real black belt. He's not a black belt like I am. Or in jiu-jitsu. Or, someone might be a golden glove boxer and the guy's like, well, this year was weaker than previous years. He's not a golden glove boxer like I am.
Yeah.
Where do you think that comes from? Is that is that an insecurity thing? Is that because some of it is in the realm of reality. Like I've seen some guys roll and I'm like, you're not a black belt.
Yeah.
And then I've also seen kind of just sour grapes in the community.
Yeah.
So, when you're saying that there's a lot of fictitious actors in this namespace, how do you mentally cope or distinguish who is legit and who is not? I need to move this. The third time I've knocked it over, forgive me.
It depends on the perspective you're coming from with it. Am I
Well,
coming
from
there
your
as
perspective-
a student, or am I coming there as somebody
No,
who's
from
trained?
you, yourself. Listen, I've done martial arts now for longer in my life than I haven't. So, like, I don't even remember what it was like to not know how to wrestle or roll or fight. You know what I mean? So, from my perspective, I'm no longer tackling this from the individual who's coming in dry. I'm now from 15 years, 16 years experience. I'm sure you have more. So, from your perspective today, how do you tackle that? Because for me, the way I tackle it is I tell myself I don't care. I don't care, Arion. Don't say anything. I don't care. But I'm also not trying to run a business in this namespace.
As long as it's not detrimental to people.
I would make the argument that it always is in martial arts.
It is if they're running their own school, but in the same, I don't know. Me personally, I stay out of that space. If I see somebody, if I'm rolling with a dude that's another blue belt, and I'm like, dude, where did you get? I'm thinking, where did you get your blue belt? You don't even know how to do an arm bar, right, or a triangle or whatever. I don't criticize them. I may think that, but I keep it to myself, just like you were saying, to each his own, whatever. If you're lying, it's going to come out either way.
Yes.
It's going to come out.
Martial arts is truth.
Yeah, for sure. And then no matter what, I've seen martial arts schools crumble because they were full of crap. You know what I mean?
That's why I think your product, I want to be careful how I word this. If it is what we perceive it to be, truth, real self-defense, from both the macro and micro, from the hand-to-hand combat to the distance combat. If it is true, it will succeed because the proof will be in the pudding. Have you thought about the curriculum, stages, when certain things will be introduced? Because we were talking about like the white belt coming in, and you're like, well, listen, headbutts would be a part of it, but not immediately. So clearly you've thought about day 1, day 100, day 1,000.
Yeah.
What does that look like? Day 1, day 100, day 1,000.
So let me back up. I 100%, and we talked about this just in conversation before, in competing.
Yes.
I think that's one of the best pressure tests that you can get. Obviously, the encouragement is to not fight, though. So, but if I always believe in pressure testing. Let's pressure test and see if it works within range of reality, right? I'm not going to try and stab you with a real knife, but I may have a shock knife and try and hit you. And if you're like, I'm like, oh, I got you, dude. That didn't work, right? Why didn't it work? And then can we adjust it? But I do believe in competition. Fully believe in competition. As long as those people want to compete, it's not going to be pressed.
When you say competition, do you mean like in individual martial arts? Because like there's boxing, amateur boxing, and professional boxing. Okay, so, but let me ask you how that ties to what it is that you're trying to do.
So,
because I could also make the argument that if you're going to competition, now you're including rule sets.
Yes.
And then when you're in a real environment, There are no rules.
Yeah.
I can bite, I can eye gouge, I can do all these other things. So like I want to agree with the initial notion of pressure cooking and, you know, putting yourself in a live environment. I do 100% agree with that. But what you're trying to do is not sport. It's life. It's physical defense. How do you cause, like, how can you create a competitive environment around that? That seems
So,
difficult.
I think the simple answer is to make people understand violence. So if you can make somebody truly understand violence and what violence, how it's perceived and what it can actually contain, that allows them then to turn that switch on and off in a real situation. Like if I understand what that threat level is that I'm at, because I don't want a 18-year-old kid that's a senior in high school to do some of the things that he may learn as a blue belt or purple belt to another high school kid.
Yeah.
Boxing.
Can I ask you, when you say the word violence, when you say to understand violence, what does that mean to you? Because violence is a word, but I want to know what that means to you.
So violence to me is not just kicking and punching somebody in sport. It's violent, right, by nature. But true violence, take a true street fighter that's fighting for his life. That's all he's known. He understands violence. Take somebody in another country or somebody who's been to combat and actually fought in heavy combat. They understand what violence is. I'm not trying to mimic those situations, but I want them to be educated as to what that really looks like.
You're trying to come as close to it as possible.
Yes.
So that it can be repeated and learn without actually engaging in it.
Yes. So a lot of it too, and this is from my experience, and then I've trained all over the world in martial arts. I've been doing it since I was 13 years old. And just whatever I could. Like, yeah, let's go do it, dude. Let's go do taekwondo. I don't care. I'm teaching my body those motions and those movements, and I'm trying to retain that as muscle memory.
Beautiful.
So at the right time, I can pull that out, whether that's muscle memory or I'm actually thinking about the situation once it's settled down, right? So what's my initial reaction? And everybody has all kinds of philosophies on it that they work, they don't work. I don't know. You have to tailor it to the person, I think.
Absolutely.
Because
no one size fits all.
No.
And that's the problem with martial arts. Is like, does it work? Yes, but like, okay, let me give you a prime example. Let's say you're doing triangle training in jiu-jitsu, and you got a guy who's 5'2". He's got the shortest legs.
Yeah.
Probably a wasted session for him, right? So it's like there are aspects of martial arts that can work
Trying
for
to triangle
everybody.
Mike.
Dude,
You're not going to do
try
it.
to do anything to Mike.
You're not going to do it.
His neck is just as wide as like my arms.
Yes.
I can appreciate what it is that you're trying to do, but if I may, I can also appreciate the daunting task that it will be.
Yeah.
So you said that you've taken time. If you were to quantify, you say like, oh, I've been thinking about this. Like, how long have you been measuring the input for something like this? Because it seems so, to me, maybe I'm just a giant pussy. It seems daunting. It seems like you're going to try to do so much. And that it works in the micro when you're the gym owner. But like, let's say you unleash this and it becomes a beast, and like now you have 2, 3, 4, 5 gyms. Then you have the whole different paradigm of expansion and like, well, how do you instill the way you feel about this, the mentality that you have about this, and extend that to other gyms? Because you're only one person. You can only be at one place at one time. And the same issues that have happened with martial arts to and from jiu-jitsu to karate, could also, like, how would you prevent that from happening to your own? So maybe I'm jumping a little bit ahead. But let's say this is a smashing success. Yeah. And in 20 years from now, you're the owner of 100 gyms. How can you look somebody in the eye and say, if you go to gym 1 or gym 98, you're getting the same experience? That seems almost impossible.
Well, number one, not to be offensive,
No,
answer,
offend me.
I'm not in it for the money. So I'm
Yes.
not looking to
Expand.
Have all these gyms. Like if it gets to a point where it's like we can get a bigger space, or somebody wants to be an owner instructor of their own Unified Combatives Academy, right? It's going to take so long to get to that point for somebody, and then I have to have that trust and confidence in them to allow them to carry that name in LLC. And I look at it similar to jiu-jitsu. A lot of people quit after blue belt, right? So there is longevity. You have to have some dedication to it to stay with it, to get to the parts that could seem questionable, like the firearms training. There's weapons training and everything.
There's also a marketing problem with that. I'll tell you what scares me is the second you start talking about firearms training, even though I believe that everyone should be around guns. Like I have a daughter. When she gets to a certain age, you better believe I'm going to introduce her to firearms. I'll let her know, hey, I want you to know that this is a tool with immense power and demands the utmost respect and honor because this has the power to defend life and take it. The ultimate decider. But I want her to understand and know this. Now, the problem with that is the way that is interpreted at the macro is like this, this weapon of war. Like, who are you, Arion? Why would you introduce a child to this? I'm not saying that your product will be, universal. I understand that. It's a niche, for sure. But how would you combat some of the clear hurdles that would be present to you?
What's the difference in me taking somebody that I've had for 5 years and teaching them how to shoot a pistol, or somebody going to an indoor range and learning from some
Doing it
dude
themselves
who just got his NRA instructor license?
Even if they do it, I mean, I know a bunch of shooting ranges. Like, can I tell you something that I always thought was weird? When I bought my first gun, I was 21 years old. Did a background check, all that other stuff, and then the place where I purchased my firearm was literally across the street from a shooting range. I was like, that's genius. You know what I mean? Good marketing there. So I purchased my firearm. It was a Ruger, just a handgun, just to get inundated with firearms, because my father never introduced me to firearms. It was kind of something that I introduced myself. Went to the shooting range, no instructor, no one to help me. And I remember thinking, this is kind of crazy, because like I've never used this weapon. I don't know how to fire this gun. And they're just letting me in. Like I signed my waiver, I did all my things. Here I am, ammunition, handgun, have fun, kid. I remember thinking, there should be more to this. It shouldn't be this easy. I don't want to say it shouldn't be this easy as like hindrances to prevent someone. I have my Second Amendment rights, go fuck yourself. But what I am saying is, I would have liked someone to kind of hold my hand, be like, hey kid, come with me. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. So I'm taking somebody that has been with me for a while, who I've trained, mentored, brought up. I know them personally. Now I'm teaching them, and they've already been through all these steps, and they already know how to save a life as well, because they've gotten that training first, right?
I will say that that's a paradigm that I'm very intrigued by, because it's so often that we're talking about like, causing harm, causing damage. Very rarely. I've never heard of a martial art that is like, here's how to resuscitate someone. Here's how to provide, first aid. Here's how to provide CPR. I think that's a beautiful aspect to it that will resonate with even the more, I don't want to say liberal. I don't want to say liberal. But the more social conscious individual. Because it's like, hey, this isn't just about violence. This is also about the protection and preservation of life.
Yeah, that, and I think the influence of, like you said, now I know, and I know enough, I don't want to fight. Now understanding where a fight actually begins, right? So in my perspective, a fight doesn't begin when we're chest puffing. The fight started, I give the analogy, because I teach firearms training now. I give the analogy, if I'm walking down an alleyway and I'm with my kid or my wife, and I look down the alleyway and the back of my hair stand up, the fight started. I have to make decisions, right? Do I flee? Do I run? Do I go over this way? What do? Do I start going for my knife? Do I put my hand near my pistol, right? So the fight starts as soon as that hair stands up. So people understanding that, I think it'll help them make proper decisions as well when those situations happen.
I agree.
Right?
I often say when the punch is thrown, the fight's already in the third round.
Yeah.
You're already there. We were in combat. It was verbal. Then maybe it was like an invasion of personal space. By the time we're actually engaged in physical combat, I would say that we've been in combat for the last 5 minutes, maybe. And people would be, I often say to people, you would be shocked at how fast real fights go. They're not these rounds. It's like 5, 6, 7 seconds, fight's over. And combat, true violence would kind of surprise and shock the average individual. Which is also, can I ask you another question, more philosophically? Do you think that's a good thing or a bad thing that we have such a large swath of our population that doesn't know how to defend themselves, that doesn't get inundated with violence? I mean,
Horrible.
you think it's horrible?
Yeah.
You don't think that's like a metric of success? Like, hey,
Yeah.
you don't need, quote unquote, to learn how to defend yourself because we live in a society where that's no longer necessary.
Yeah,
Or do you think that this is like a fiction, that
That is
it's
the
never
farthest from the truth, especially
Today.
nowadays. That is, yeah. And you'd be surprised how many people are, and I don't want to, middle class and below are genuinely worried about it.
Yeah.
But the first thing that everybody wants to go to, and I'm all about guns. Like I'm going to get back into shooting competitions, everything. I'm Second Amendment as well. But that's the first thing that they think that's the only option.
No, I hate that because then it becomes the wild, wild west.
Yeah.
I think firearms. Let me know if I'm speaking out of turn here, because when it comes to martial arts, I feel adequately trained to speak on the topic. But when it comes to firearms training, I was never in the armed forces. I've only spent the hours that I spent in the shooting range. I've never shot anything other than a deer, right? But I think the idea that a firearm is your first course of action is similar to the same mentality that I had before I learned how to fight, that when I did learn how to fight, I was like, oh man, when I learn how to box, I'm going to fuck everybody up. I think that's the same mentality people have with firearms until they have one in their hands. And then once they get the hours in the shooting range, once they maybe actually break apart their firearm and clean it for the first time, reapply oil and put it back together, they start to actually form a respect for what it is that they are holding. And it goes back to the thing I was saying, you have in your hands the ultimate decider to preserve and take life. And, I think one of the nice things about martial arts, and if you do decide to go down this path, is not just like the physical aspect of it, but also the emotional and mental. Because one of the things that martial arts has done for me is just made me immensely mentally strong and more empathetic, because when you compete, you lose and you win, so you know how to be a great winner and a great loser, right? This is the top of the top, though, where losing has dire ramifications, but so does winning. And I think if you can develop a system that'll give them the mentality that we can benefit from in martial arts, but to extend that to also life, quite literally. I think it'll create better human beings to the point where they might be learned, they might know how to use a gun, the proper time and place, and still be disciplined enough to not necessarily make that the only course of action. And then in doing so, in training people on how to defend and possibly take life, you will actually preserve more life.
I agree 100%. And those metrics that it takes to get to that point, though, have to be in there, right? And it takes time. I agree 100%
Pete,
with that.
I genuinely hope for your success on this. What does before I end the podcast, because a lot of this was philosophical, a lot of this, but with
Which
this
is crazy, because like I told you, I ate a lot of crayons while I was in the Marine Corps, dude, and my knuckles are scarred up from it.
I think if I may, intelligence and wisdom are two different things, right? Intelligence is based on the topic. Wisdom is based on your time. The older you are, the more time you spend on this planet, you will develop wisdom. Intelligence is whatever it is that you're interested in. You might say that you eat, I play with crayons, all this. And I made the joke with you. I was like, brother, I walk on my fucking knuckles and throw shit at the wall. But like, if you ask me about certain things that I've dedicated my life to, one of them is martial arts. And I'm very fervent and very passionate about this topic. There are many topics that I don't know dick about. And that's why I started a podcast, to learn about them. But the things that I do know about, I will speak to. And I think one of the things we developed in this is like, I've respected your passion for what it is that you're trying to do. And I think that you've also respected my passion for what it is that I'm trying to do. And the beauty in that is they're similar, and we've had an intelligent, articulate conversation about a topic that we're learned on, and we didn't stray from the path. I didn't start talking about, when we were talking about pharmaceuticals, I didn't start talking about the biology of your body. I don't fucking know anything about that. I'll stick to what I know about, brother. And Pete, this was immensely enjoyable, but before we end, I do want to ask, like I said, we were talking about a lot of the philosophy about combat, violence, military. What does the next steps look like for you? Because right now this is a plan. This is like a formulation in your head. what are the steps that you still need to get to where this is like a brick and mortar gym? I'm now having students. How much have you thought about this?
I'm in talks with a space right now in Wentzville. So
no shit.
yeah.
Will you do me a favor? Will you let me know if and when you get to that next level? I'm just
for sure.
I like, you know, this is also for the people to realize this is the first time I've met Pete, and we've had a phone call before or two. I didn't know what Mike was saying when he first explained this to me, but now having talked with you for an hour and a half, I genuinely hope for your success. I genuinely hope that this is something that bears fruit and that you can actually like extend your passion and love. It's not about self-defense. It's about everything else that will come with people that can defend themselves. So I genuinely hope for your success, brother.
Yep, and hopefully he'll come out and help me pressure test some stuff.
Dude, are you kidding me? I'll get headbutted by anybody.
Yeah.
Pete.
It's awesome.
Thank
I appreciate
you,
it, man. Thank you. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome.